I leaned against the glass railing of the penthouse balcony, a cool breeze rustling my silk robe as I gazed at the city skyline. Lights twinkled in the distance, a symphony of motion and life, yet I felt oddly detached from it all. At 39, I had everything: a thriving business, wealth beyond my childhood dreams, and a luxurious home that most could only fantasize about. But money had become both my blessing and my curse. Every man I had ever allowed close had seen my wealth first, my heart second. I was their ticket to a life of ease, not a person to be cherished. Except for him, my son, the only man in my life who loved me for who I was and not what I had. Ethan was 18 now, standing at the cusp of adulthood, yet I still saw traces of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare, seeking comfort in my arms. He had always been my anchor, the one constant in a world where everything else felt fleeting. The sliding door behind me opened with a soft hiss. "Mom." Ethan's voice was warm, familiar. "You okay?" I turned to him, smiling faintly. He stood there barefoot, in sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, looking effortlessly at home in our grand space. His hair was tousled from a shower, a contrast to the sharp, grown-up angles of his face. "Just thinking," I admitted, sipping from my wine glass. "Enjoying the view." He came closer, resting his arms on the railing beside me. "You always say that when something's bothering you." I laughed softly, maybe because it's true. He glanced at me then, the weight of his gaze something I had grown used to over the years. Ethan had always been perceptive, seeing through the layers I presented to the world. It was both a comfort and a vulnerability. "You work too hard," he said, nudging me gently. "When's the last time you did something just for you?" "This," I gestured to the view, "is for me." He sighed. "I mean really for you, Mom. Something that makes you happy." I wanted to tell him that my happiness was seeing him thrive, that despite the loneliness, I had never regretted choosing to focus on him rather than chasing relationships that only led to disappointment. But I knew he wouldn't accept that as an answer. "Maybe I don't know what that is anymore," I confessed. Ethan's brows furrowed. "Then we should figure it out." I arched a brow. "We?" He grinned. "Yeah, why not? A weekend getaway or something. Just us." I hesitated. The idea was tempting, but something about the way he said it made my chest tighten with an emotion I couldn't name. "You don't have to take care of me, Ethan," I said softly. He turned fully to face me then, his expression unreadable. "Maybe I want to." Silence stretched between us, thick with something neither of us dared to acknowledge. I exhaled, setting my glass down. "All right. A trip sounds nice." His smile was brilliant, and I felt the warmth of it in my bones. "Good," he said. "I'll plan everything. You just relax." I nodded, though a part of me wondered if relaxing was even possible anymore. Especially not when I felt this strange, growing awareness that my son, the boy I had raised, the only person who had never let me down, was no longer just my little boy. And that terrified me more than anything. The next morning, I woke to the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifting through the penthouse. It was an unusual sensation, waking up without the usual weight of schedules, meetings, and obligations pressing down on me. The light streamed through the sheer curtains, casting golden patterns on the crisp, white sheets of my bed. For a few minutes, I just lay there, stretching lazily, listening to the faint sounds coming from the kitchen. Ethan was up early. That in itself was surprising. My son was never much of a morning person, but today he was moving around with purpose. I slipped out of bed, tying my robe loosely around me, and padded barefoot into the living room. The sight that greeted me was one I hadn't expected: Ethan, standing in the open kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 cups. The marble countertops were littered with the remnants of an actual breakfast being prepared, something I hadn't had in ages. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "I made your favorite." I leaned against the doorway, watching him with amusement. And how do you know what my favorite is? He turned then, holding out a cup for me, his expression smug. I pay attention. I accepted the coffee, taking a slow sip, savoring the rich warmth. It was exactly how I liked it. Thank you, I murmured. Ethan tilted his head, studying me. You're not used to this, are you? What do you mean? Someone taking care of you. I hesitated. He wasn't wrong. For so long, I had been the provider, the one who made sure everything was running smoothly, ensuring that no one else had to worry about a thing. It had become second nature to me to be strong, independent, untouchable. The idea of someone, even my own son, stepping in to lighten the weight I carried was foreign. It's not that I'm not used to it, I said finally, setting my cup down. It's just not something that happens often. Well, he said, turning back to the stove, get used to it. I watched as he plated food with casual ease, soft scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, things I normally wouldn't take the time to prepare for myself. When he set the plate in front of me, I couldn't help but smile. You didn't have to go through all this trouble, I said, though I didn't protest. Ethan sat across from me, his own plate in front of him. I wanted to. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who truly understand each other. Every now and then, I'd glance up and find him watching me, a quiet intensity in his gaze that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the usual casual glances of a son checking in on his mother. It was something deeper, something searching. You keep looking at me like that, I teased, and I'm going to think there's something on my face. He smirked. I'm just making sure you actually enjoy taking a break for once. I do, I admitted, but I also feel like you're up to something. Ethan shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. I told you, we're going away for the weekend. You deserve it. I raised a brow. So this is really happening? Of course it is. I already booked everything. I set my fork down. Ethan! Mom! His voice was firm but gentle. No arguments. Just say yes. I exhaled, shaking my head with a smile. Fine. Yes. His grin was triumphant. Good. We're leaving tomorrow afternoon. I was still trying to wrap my head around it as the day went on. The idea of stepping away from my work, from my responsibilities, felt strange. But every time I considered protesting, I saw the way Ethan was looking at me, determined, pleased, as if this was something he had been waiting to do for a long time. By evening, the packing was done. Ethan had taken care of everything, down to the smallest detail. He had chosen a secluded, luxurious resort on the coast, somewhere far enough from the city that it felt like an escape, but close enough that I wouldn't feel completely disconnected. I stood by my suitcase, running my fingers over the smooth fabric, feeling the anticipation start to settle in. This was happening. Ethan walked past my room, pausing in the doorway. You ready? I turned to him, nodding. I think so. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed over his chest. You know, you don't always have to do everything alone. I met his gaze, something in his tone making my stomach tighten. I know. Good, he said, his eyes lingering on me for a moment longer before he disappeared down the hall. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about how much he had grown. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a man, thoughtful and protective, someone who saw me in ways no one else ever had. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to wonder what it would be like to be truly seen. The sun was warm on my skin as I stepped out onto the wooden deck of our private villa. The resort was breathtaking, tucked away from the chaos of city life, surrounded by palm trees and the soft whisper of waves. The air smelled of salt and coconut, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could truly breathe. Ethan had taken care of everything. From the moment we arrived, I hadn't had to lift a finger. He checked us in, arranged for our bags to be taken to the villa, and even ensured that my favorite kind of wine was waiting in an ice bucket by the terrace. I was used to being the one in control, the one who planned, who provided, who handled every last detail. But here, Ethan had flipped our roles entirely. "Relax, Mom," he said, handing me a chilled glass of wine as I settled onto the plush lounge chair. "You're on vacation. That means no work, no stress. Just let me take care of you." I raised an eyebrow, sipping the wine. "You act like I don't know how to relax." "You don't," he teased, sitting on the chair next to mine, stretching out his legs. "That's why I had to drag you here." I smirked. "I came willingly." He shot me a knowing look. "Eventually." I rolled my eyes but didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. The sound of the waves, the warmth of the sun, the gentle breeze, it all made me feel lighter than I had in years. Ethan turned his head slightly, watching me, his expression unreadable. "What?" I asked. He shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "You look beautiful when you're not worrying about 100 things at once." The compliment caught me off guard. It wasn't the first time Ethan had said something sweet to me, but there was something different in the way he said it now. "Flattery will get you everywhere," I said, taking another sip of my wine. He chuckled. "It's not flattery if it's true." The rest of the afternoon passed in blissful relaxation. Ethan made sure I had everything I needed: snacks, fresh towels, even a book he knew I had been meaning to read but never found the time for. At one point, he disappeared for a bit, only to return with 2 glasses of a vibrant orange cocktail. "What's this?" I asked, taking the drink from him. "A surprise. The bartender said it's the best on the island." I took a sip, the sweet and citrusy flavors dancing on my tongue. That is good." Ethan watched me, satisfied. "Only the best for you." I smiled at him. "You're spoiling me." "Of course," he said without hesitation. "Only kings deserve you." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Kings, huh?" He leaned back, his gaze steady. "Yeah, you're not just anyone, Mom. You deserve to be treated like royalty." The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in my chest. I wasn't used to hearing things like that, not in a way that felt so deeply meant. The men in my past had always showered me with words when they wanted something, but Ethan wasn't like that. He had nothing to gain from complimenting me, no ulterior motive. He was just being Ethan, and that made it all the more powerful. The next day, he had planned a boat trip. I didn't know about it until the morning when he knocked on my bedroom door with a grin on his face. "Up," he said. "We're going on an adventure." I groaned, burying my face in the pillows. "It's early. It's 9. Exactly." He laughed, walking over to pull the blankets off me. "Come on. You'll love it." I sighed dramatically but got up anyway. Ethan had already laid out an outfit for me, a flowing white sundress that I hadn't worn in years. I raised an eyebrow at him. "You're picking my clothes now." "I just thought it would look nice on you," he said, shrugging. And I was right. I slipped the dress on, and when I stepped out, I saw Ethan waiting for me on the deck. His eyes lingered on me for a second longer than usual before he smiled. "See," he said. "Told you." The boat ride was magical. The captain took us along the coastline, where the cliffs jutted out like something from a dream. The water was impossibly blue, reflecting the sky in a way that made it look like liquid glass. Ethan stood beside me, leaning on the railing, his hair ruffled by the wind. "Isn't this amazing?" he asked. I nodded, exhaling. "It really is. See, I do know what I'm doing." I smiled at him. "You do. I'm impressed." He turned his head toward me, his expression softer now. "I just wanted you to have something special. Something that's just for you." I swallowed, feeling the warmth of his words settle in my chest. "You always make sure I have everything, Ethan." "Because you deserve it," he said simply. The rest of the day was filled with stolen moments of joy. We swam in the crystal-clear water, played in the waves like carefree kids, and lay on the boat's deck, soaking up the sun. At one point, Ethan grabbed my hand and pulled me into a dance, spinning me around as the boat rocked gently beneath us. I laughed, shaking my head. "What are you doing?" "Dancing with you," he said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. No music needed. His confidence was infectious, and before I knew it, I was smiling, moving with him under the open sky. That night, back at the villa, I sat on the edge of the infinity pool, dipping my feet into the warm water. Ethan joined me, handing me another glass of wine. "You're staring again," I teased. He smirked. "Maybe I'm just making sure you're happy." I looked at him then, really looked at him. He had grown into such a remarkable man, kind, protective, thoughtful in ways that made my heart ache. "I am," I said softly, "because of you." A slow smile spread across his lips. "Good." We sat there in comfortable silence, the waves rolling in the distance, the stars reflecting in the water. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about tomorrow, or the past, or what needed to be done. I was just here, with him, and it was enough. Ethan turned to me, his face lit up with that boyish grin he had carried since childhood, the one that always meant he was up to something. The water in the infinity pool shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting the soft glow of the lanterns around the villa. The air was warm, carrying the scent of salt and tropical flowers. "Let's do something fun," he said, nudging me with his shoulder. I looked at him, amused. "Aren't we already having fun?" "Something different," he clarified. "Let's jump in together. Hold hands and just go under." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Why?" "Because it'll be fun," he insisted, his eyes gleaming. "Come on. When was the last time you did something silly, just for the hell of it?" I hesitated, staring at the water, then at him. He was already standing up, holding out his hand, waiting for me. There was something infectious about his enthusiasm, something that made me want to follow along. I sighed dramatically. "Fine, but if I slip and make a fool of myself, I'm blaming you." He grinned. "Deal." I placed my hand in his, and he squeezed it gently. Standing at the edge of the pool, I felt my pulse quicken. I hadn't done something so playful in years. "On 3, he said. 1, 2. Before he could finish, he pulled me forward, and we plunged into the water together. The shock of it sent a thrill through me, the warmth of the pool enveloping us as we sank beneath the surface. The world above blurred into soft ripples of moonlight, and for a moment it was just us, suspended in the silence of the water, our hands still clasped. When we broke the surface, gasping and laughing, I pushed my wet hair back from my face. "You didn't even wait for 3. Ethan chuckled, swimming closer. "You should know by now I never play fair." The night air was cooler against my damp skin as I floated lazily in the water. Ethan was watching me again, that quiet, unreadable look in his eyes. "You know," he said, "you don't look a day over 25 when you smile like that." I rolled my eyes, laughing. "Oh, please." "I mean it," he said, moving closer, his voice softer now. "You look happy. You look free." I faltered, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. No one had ever said something like that to me before, at least not in a way that felt so deeply meant. "You always know what to say," I murmured, floating toward the edge of the pool, my fingers brushing along the tile. "That's because I pay attention." He reached out, tucking a damp strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was light, careful, but enough to send a warm shiver down my spine. Before I could react, he leaned in and pressed a feather-light kiss to my cheek. I froze, the world narrowing to the sensation of his lips against my skin. It was so brief, so delicate, yet it lingered, setting something deep within me alight. My breath caught as I turned to him. "Ethan, you deserve to be treated like a princess," he said simply, his voice warm and steady. "No, like a queen." A flush crept up my neck, though whether from the warmth of the water or the intensity of his gaze, I wasn't sure. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, we floated there in the pool, the night stretching endlessly around us, as if the world had shrunk to just this moment. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone truly saw me. Not as a businesswoman, not as someone with wealth, not even just as a mother. Just me,